October 23, 2025. FBI Director Kash Patel stood at a podium in Brooklyn, flanked by dozens of federal agents and NYPD officers. The cameras were rolling. The media was packed into the room. And what Patel announced sent shockwaves through professional sports and organized crime circles alike. Chauncey Billups, Hall of Fame NBA player, current head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, was being indicted. Terry Rozier, guard for the Miami Heat, was being charged. Damon Jones, former player and coach, was arrested. All of them, according to federal prosecutors, had participated in rigged poker games and illegal gambling operations orchestrated by the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families. 34 people total were indicted that day. 4 of New York's legendary 5 families were named in the charges. The operation involved tens of millions of dollars. And here's what should terrify everyone who thought the mob was dead. This wasn't some dusty cold case from the 1980s. This was happening right now, today, February 24th, 2026. As you're watching this video, the 5 families are active, operating, making money, and exerting influence in ways that would shock most Americans who think organized crime is just a relic of cinema history. The truth, the mob never died. It evolved. And in 2026, nearly 95 years after Lucky Luciano created the commission and established the 5 families, these criminal organizations are still here. Smaller, quieter, more careful than their glory days, but absolutely, undeniably active. And tonight, we're going to show you exactly how they're operating today, who's running them, and why the FBI can't seem to stop them. If you want to know the real state of organized crime in America right now, not the movies, not the nostalgia, but the actual modern mafia operating in 2026, hit that subscribe button immediately. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. Are you watching this at midnight, shocked that the mob is still around? Or during your lunch break, fascinated by modern organized crime? Let us know. And if you love content that exposes what's really happening in the criminal underworld today, smash that like button. And share this with someone who thinks the mafia died with John Gotti. The Syndicate Files, where we investigate the organized crime that's happening right now, not decades ago. Let's start with the most important question. Who actually runs the 5 families in 2026? Because unlike the 1980s, when John Gotti was on magazine covers and mob bosses were household names, today's mafia leadership operates in shadows. They learned from Gotti's mistakes. They watched him become a media sensation and then die in federal prison. The current generation of bosses are invisible, low profile, and far more sophisticated than their predecessors. The Gambino crime family is the most powerful and remains the largest of the 5 families. The official boss is Domenico Italian Dom Cefalo, who has held this position since 2011. But here's where it gets interesting. The street boss, the guy actually running day-to-day operations, is Lorenzo Mannino. Mannino is a fascinating figure in modern organized crime. He's part of the Gambino family's powerful Sicilian faction, or Zips, members who have direct connections to the Sicilian Mafia in Italy. Mannino was convicted in 1994 for drug trafficking and conspiring to murder Francesco Oliveri in 1988, and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He was released in 2004 and has since risen to become one of the most powerful mob figures in New York. He serves dual roles as both acting street boss and consigliere, an unusual concentration of power that indicates how much influence he wields. The Gambino family has approximately 200 made members, making it the largest family by membership. But the Gambino family's recent history reveals the dangers of modern mob life. In March 2019, Frank Colli, who'd been serving as acting boss, was shot and killed outside his home in Staten Island. It was the first hit on a sitting mob boss in New York since Paul Castellano was murdered in 1985 on John Gotti's orders. The murder shocked the underworld. But here's the twist. The killing was not mafia-related. The shooter, Anthony Camello, was a disturbed individual with no mob connections who apparently killed Cali over a personal dispute. This random act of violence shows how even modern mob bosses aren't safe from threats outside the traditional underworld. The Genovese crime family is considered by many law enforcement experts to be the most powerful and sophisticated of the 5 families, even though it's not the largest. The official boss is Liborio Barney Bellomo, with Michael Mickey Ragusa serving as street boss and Ernest Ernie Muscarella as underboss. The Genovese family has approximately 220 made members. What makes the Genovese family particularly dangerous is their discipline and their adherence to old-school mob rules. They don't seek publicity. They don't make headlines. They just quietly make money through labor racketeering, gambling, loan sharking, and legitimate businesses they control through intimidation. The Genovese family pioneered the concept of the front boss, a figurehead leader who takes the heat while the real boss operates from the shadows. This strategy has proven remarkably effective at avoiding prosecution. Even when the FBI thinks they know who's running the family, proving it in court is extremely difficult because the actual boss maintains multiple layers of insulation from criminal activity. The Bonanno crime family has had a tumultuous modern history. The official boss is Michael Mickey Nose Mancuso, with John Johnny Joe Spirito Sr. as underboss and Ernest Ernie Aiello as consigliere, though Aiello is currently under indictment. The Bonanno family has approximately 120 made members, making it one of the smaller families. This family was famously infiltrated by FBI agent Joseph Pistone, Donnie Brasco, in the 1970s and early 1980s, which led to massive prosecutions and the family being temporarily kicked off the commission. They've rebuilt, but they remain the subject of intense FBI scrutiny. The Lucchesi crime family is run by Vittorio Vic Amuso, who's serving life imprisonment. Michael Big Mike DeSantis serves as acting boss. The Lucchesi family was decimated by prosecutions in the 1980s and 1990s, but like all the families, they've shown remarkable resilience. They continue to operate gambling rings, loan sharking operations, and have influence in certain labor unions and construction businesses. The Colombo crime family is the smallest and most fractured of the 5 families. As of 2025, Theodore N. Skinny Teddy Persico Jr. is listed as the current leader. The Colombo family has been plagued by internal wars and federal prosecutions for decades. Multiple bloody conflicts over leadership have left the family weakened, with perhaps fewer than 100 made members remaining. But even in their diminished state, they continue criminal operations. These aren't dusty old men sitting in social clubs reminiscing about the good old days. These are active criminal enterprises generating millions of dollars annually through sophisticated operations. And the recent NBA gambling scandal proves just how active they really are. The indictments announced on October 23, 2025, provided the most concrete proof in years that the 5 families are not only active, but operating at the highest levels of American society. Federal law enforcement announced 2 indictments involving current and former NBA players and coaches, along with members of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families. Let's break down exactly what happened, because this wasn't some small-time operation. This was a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise that had been running for years, involving some of the most famous names in professional basketball. The first indictment, filed in the U.S. District Court, Eastern District of New York, named Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and 29 other men as defendants. Prosecutors alleged that Billups and Jones had joined numerous high-stakes poker games in the New York City area that were organized by members of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families. These weren't casual poker nights among friends. These were sophisticated, rigged gambling operations designed to defraud wealthy victims out of millions of dollars. According to the indictment, Phillips and Jones exploited their status as prominent former athletes to attract wealthy victims to these games. Think about that for a second. If you're a wealthy businessman or celebrity, and you get invited to play poker with NB, a Hall of Famer Chauncey Billups, you'd probably feel honored. You'd trust the game was legitimate, because why would someone that famous and successful need to cheat at cards? That's exactly what the mob was counting on. The defendants were alleged to have used various technological means, such as hidden cameras and altered card shuffling machines, to rig the games against unsuspecting players. Billups and Jones then received a cut of the fraudulently won earnings from these games as compensation. This is classic mob methodology updated for the modern era. Instead of breaking legs or burning down businesses, they're using technology, hidden cameras, modified shuffling machines, encrypted communications to commit crimes that are harder to detect and prosecute. The second indictment was even more disturbing because it struck at the heart of sports integrity. Current Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier was accused of having given advance warning to co-conspirators that he would fake an injury and remove himself from a basketball game, thereby allowing his associates to make bets on his performance using inside information. This is match fixing. This is the kind of corruption that threatens the fundamental integrity of professional sports. And it wasn't just one game. The indictment includes several cases in which Damon Jones, while serving as an unofficial assistant coach on the Los Angeles Lakers, sold privileged information, including about an athlete's injury, to bettors. Subsequent news reports indicated that one of those players was LeBron James, who was not accused of any wrongdoing. Jones was selling insider information about LeBron James' health status to gamblers connected to the mob. This allowed them to make informed bets that regular bettors couldn't possibly know about. Perhaps most damningly, prosecutors alleged that prior to a March 24, 2023, game between the Portland Trail Blazers and the Chicago Bulls, a co-conspirator told a defendant that numerous Portland starters would not be playing. This information was then used to place successful bets against the Trail Blazers in that game. Although the indictment does not name the co-conspirator, it provides details that strongly suggest it refers to Chauncey Billups. If these allegations are true, Billups was providing insider information about his own team's lineup to gamblers connected to organized crime. The scale of the operation was massive. A total of 34 individuals were arrested as a result of the investigation, which involved tens of millions of dollars. This wasn't a few $1,000s changing hands. This was a sophisticated criminal enterprise generating massive profits over multiple years, operating across state lines, involving 4 of the 5 families and some of the most famous athletes in America. The indictments charged more than 30 individuals, including alleged members and associates of the Genovese, Bonanno Gambino, and Lucchese organized crime families, as well as Chauncey Billups, head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, and Damon Jones, a former NBA player and assistant coach. According to the indictments, they were connected with a criminal enterprise accused of rigging high-stakes poker games in New York City and across the United States. Hours after the charges were made public, the NBA acted swiftly. Both Billups and Rozier were placed on leave. The league was facing its worst corruption scandal in decades, and the story dominated sports media for weeks, with analysts and fans debating the implications for the integrity of professional basketball. But here's what many people missed in the media frenzy. This scandal wasn't primarily about NBA players being corrupt. It was about the 5 families demonstrating that they still have the capability, connections, and sophistication to penetrate the highest levels of American sports and entertainment. They identified wealthy targets. They recruited famous athletes to provide legitimacy and access. They used modern technology to rig games. They laundered millions of dollars. And they did it all while remaining in the shadows, with only a handful of investigators even suspecting what was happening. This is modern organized crime, not the street violence and public murders of the Gotti era. not the romanticized mob of movies and TV shows. This is quiet, sophisticated, extremely profitable criminal activity that's almost impossible to detect until someone flips and starts cooperating with authorities. And when it was finally exposed, it showed the world something undeniable. The five families are not only active in 2026, they re-thriving. The mob of 2026 bears little resemblance to the mob of the 1980s. Gone are the social clubs, where wise guys openly congregated. Gone are the public murders that dominated tabloid headlines. Gone are the flashy mob bosses driving Cadillacs and wearing expensive suits to high-profile trials. Today's mafia learned from those mistakes. They watched John Gotti become famous and die in prison. They saw how media attention brought federal scrutiny that destroyed entire families. They adapted. Modern organized crime operates on three fundamental principles: stay invisible, exploit technology, and diversify income streams. Let's examine each of these. Invisibility is the new code of the modern mob. Despite being the subject of intense surveillance, the families have learned to fly under the radar, avoiding significant legal headaches until investigators can build overwhelming cases. Current mob bosses don't give interviews. They don't attend public events. Many of them use front bosses figureheads who take the legal heat while the real boss operates in complete anonymity. Lorenzo Manino, the Gambino street boss, maintains such a low profile that most people have never heard of him despite running one of the most powerful criminal organizations in New York. The families communicate through encrypted messaging apps and burner phones. They avoid leaving paper trails. They conduct business in person whenever possible, knowing that electronic surveillance is the FBI's most powerful tool. They've learned that the biggest risk isn't getting caught committing a crime. It's getting caught talking about committing a crime. So they talk less, and when they do talk, they speak in code. Technology exploitation is the second pillar of modern mob operations. The NBA gambling scandal showed how the families are using hidden cameras, modified card shuffling machines, and encrypted communications to commit crimes. But that's just the beginning. Though recently, their crimes have evolved, ranging from cyber-enabled gambling and tax fraud to financial manipulation. The mob has embraced cryptocurrency for money laundering. They operate online gambling sites. They use sophisticated financial instruments to hide the proceeds of criminal activity. One particularly effective modern scheme involves online sports betting. With the recent legalization of sports gambling in many states, the mob has found new opportunities. They operate illegal betting sites that avoid taxes and regulations. They fix games through bribery or intimidation of players and officials. They use insider information to make guaranteed profits. And because everything happens online and across state lines, it's incredibly difficult for law enforcement to track and prosecute. Labor racketeering has also evolved. Instead of the crude extortion tactics of the past, modern mob control of unions and industries is far more subtle. They provide consulting services. They ensure labor peace. They facilitate business relationships. All of this is code for extortion and corruption, but it's packaged in ways that look almost legitimate on paper. Construction projects in New York still pay tribute to the mob, but it's structured as payments to consulting firms or labor management companies that happen to be controlled by made men. Diversified income streams are the third pillar. The five families have learned not to rely too heavily on any single criminal enterprise. Investigators say these groups are running high-stakes online poker and sports betting operations, using modern technology to manipulate outcomes and launder profits. But they're also involved in drug trafficking. Despite official rules against narcotics, all the families profit from the drug trade through partnerships with other criminal organizations. They provide financing, distribution networks, and money laundering services. Loan sharking. This remains a core mob business. In addition to operating illegal sportsbooks, mob associates allegedly engaged in illegal loan sharking activities, issuing usurious loans to individuals for thousands of dollars and penalizing them 3 points, or 3% interest, each week over the life of the loan. 3% per week equals 156% annual interest. Miss a payment, and the interest compounds while the threats escalate. Waste management. New York's garbage industry has been mob-controlled for decades. Despite repeated prosecutions and cleanup efforts, organized crime families maintain significant influence over waste hauling and disposal contracts. Construction and unions. Major construction projects in New York City still involve mob-controlled unions and subcontractors. The families take a percentage of projects through various schemes: inflated labor costs, no-show jobs, overcharging for materials, and outright extortion. Legitimate businesses. Many made men and associates own and operate legal businesses, restaurants, construction companies, import-export firms, retail stores. These businesses serve multiple purposes. They provide legitimate income that can be reported to the IRS. They offer opportunities to launder criminal proceeds, and they provide cover for criminal activities. The mob has also learned to avoid the high-profile crimes that bring intense law enforcement attention. According to research, the families initially gain power through illegal activities such as extortion, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. Over time, they moved into more sophisticated operations. They don't rob banks or armored cars anymore. Too much risk, too much attention. They don't kidnap people or commit high-profile murders. Instead, they focus on crimes that generate steady income with minimal visibility: gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and fraud. One FBI agent described modern mob operations like this: they're not doing stick-ups or bank jobs. They're running sophisticated financial crimes that look almost legitimate. They're exploiting legal gray areas. They're operating in industries where corruption is endemic and hard to distinguish from normal business practices. And they're making more money with far less risk than the old-school mobsters ever did. But there is one more aspect of modern mob operations that makes them particularly difficult to combat: cooperation with other criminal organizations. The five families aren't just competing with each other anymore. They're partnering with Russian organized crime, Albanian gangs, Mexican cartels, and other criminal enterprises. These partnerships allow them to operate on a much larger scale while sharing risks and resources. A Gambino captain might provide financing and distribution for a Russian cybercrime operation. A Genovese crew might launder money for a Mexican cartel. This international cooperation makes prosecution incredibly complex because it involves multiple jurisdictions, countries, and legal systems. The hierarchical structure that has defined the mob since Lucky Luciano created the commission in 1931 remains intact. Experts say the hierarchical structure remains largely the same: a boss at the top, followed by an underboss, capos, and soldiers. What's changed is how cautiously and cleverly that structure operates. Orders are given verbally. Money moves through complex networks of businesses and offshore accounts. Criminal activity is insulated by multiple layers of associates and legitimate businesses. And the bosses, the men actually running these organizations, remain almost completely invisible to the public and difficult to prosecute even when the FBI knows who they are. Here's the uncomfortable truth that law enforcement doesn't like to admit. Despite decades of prosecutions, despite RICO statutes, despite witness protection programs and aggressive investigations, the FBI has not been able to eliminate the five families. They've weakened them. They have prosecuted hundreds of made men. They have secured life sentences for multiple bosses. But they haven't stopped them. Why? Because organized crime has proven remarkably resilient, adaptive, and decentralized. Every time the FBI takes down a boss, someone steps up to replace him. Every time they destroy one crew, another crew expands to fill the vacuum. The five families are like hydras. Cut off one head and another grows back. By mid-century, there were 26 official commission-sanctioned mafia crime families, each based in a different city. Each family operated independently from the others and generally had exclusive territory it controlled. Today, that number has shrunk significantly. Many families in smaller cities have been effectively destroyed or absorbed by larger organizations. But the five families in New York have endured. Part of the reason is structural. The mob's hierarchical organization, with its clear chain of command and division of labor, makes it incredibly efficient. The American Mafia operates on a strict hierarchical structure created by Salvatore Maranzano in 1931. He created the five families, each of which would have a boss, an underboss, capos, and soldiers. This structure allows the organization to function even when leadership is imprisoned or killed. The underboss takes over for the boss. Capos run their crews independently. Soldiers know their roles. The organization continues operating. But the deeper reason the FBI cannot eliminate the five families is economic. There is too much money involved, and too many people willing to participate in criminal activity for that money. As long as there is demand for illegal gambling, loan sharking, drugs, labor racketeering, and fraud, organized crime will exist to meet that demand. The FBI can prosecute individuals, but they cannot eliminate the market conditions that make organized crime profitable. Consider the October 2025 indictments. 34 people were arrested, including multiple made men and associates from 4 different families. These arrests will undoubtedly disrupt some mob operations, but they won't destroy the families. New captains will be promoted. New soldiers will be made. New associates will be recruited. The organizations will adapt, become more cautious, and continue operating. The FBI's most successful tool against the mob has been the Witness Protection Program combined with RICO statutes. On January 20th, 2011, the United States Justice Department issued 16 indictments against Northeast American Mafia families, resulting in 127 charged defendants and more than 110 arrests. The charges included murder, murder conspiracy, loan sharking, arson, robbery, narcotics trafficking, extortion, illegal gambling, and labor racketeering. It has been described as the largest operation against the mafia in U.S. history. These massive roundups make headlines and result in significant prison sentences, but they haven't eliminated the families. In 2017, there was another major sweep. In 2023, more indictments. In 2025, the NBA gambling scandal led to more arrests. Each time, prosecutors announced they've dealt a crippling blow to organized crime. Each time, the families rebuild. Why do these operations fail to eliminate the mob? Several reasons. First, the Code of Omerta, though weakened, still holds power. Many mobsters would rather go to prison than cooperate with authorities. They know that cooperation means living in witness protection forever, looking over their shoulder, afraid that a contract killer will find them. They know it means betraying friends and family. Some choose prison instead. Second, the legitimate economy and the criminal economy are more intertwined than most people realize. Construction, waste management, entertainment, gambling in New York. These industries have mob involvement that's difficult to separate from normal business operations. Prosecuting mob control of these industries means disrupting legitimate economic activity, which creates political and economic pressure to back off. Third, the mob has learned to exploit legal gray areas and jurisdictional complications. Operating across state lines makes investigations more complex. Using legitimate businesses to launder money makes financial crimes harder to prove. Structuring criminal operations to look like legitimate business deals creates reasonable doubt that can defeat prosecutions. Fourth, corruption remains a problem. Not every cop is honest. Not every prosecutor is incorruptible. The mob has always relied on bribing or blackmailing officials, and that continues today. When key evidence disappears, when investigations mysteriously stall, when witnesses recant their testimony, sometimes it's incompetence, but sometimes it's corruption. The five families still have the money and connections to corrupt officials when necessary. Fifth, public apathy plays a role. Most Americans don't care about the mob as long as it doesn't affect them directly. Gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering. These are often considered victimless crimes, even though they generate billions for organized crime. Without public pressure, law enforcement resources get diverted to other priorities: terrorism, drug cartels, cybercrime. The mob benefits from being less visible and less threatening than other criminal organizations. And finally, there is a generational knowledge problem in law enforcement. The FBI agents who investigated the mob in the 1980s and 1990s, the ones who understood how the families operated, who knew the players, who could recognize mob activity, many of them have retired. The new generation of agents is focused on terrorism and cybercrime. They are not as familiar with traditional organized crime. The families have exploited this knowledge gap, operating more freely as fewer investigators understand their methods. Looking forward, what does the future hold for the five families? They are not going away. They'll continue to adapt, to find new criminal opportunities, to exploit weaknesses in the legal system and the economy. They will get smaller and more cautious, operating in shadows while the FBI focuses on more visible threats. But they will survive, as they have survived for nearly a century, because fundamentally, organized crime exists because it meets market demands that the legitimate economy can't or won't fulfill. Today, February 24th, 2026, the five families are active. They are generating millions of dollars through gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and fraud. They are run by bosses whose names most people don't know, using methods that most people don't understand, committing crimes that most people don't see. And despite everything the FBI has done, despite all the prosecutions and all the prison sentences, the mob endures. The myth that the Mafia died with John Gotti has been exposed. The October 2025 NBA gambling scandal proved beyond any doubt that the five families are not only active. They are sophisticated, well-connected, and capable of penetrating the highest levels of American society. From the Gambino family's approximately 200 made members to the complex web of illegal gambling operations involving NBA stars, organized crime in 2026 is alive, evolving, and thriving. If you want to stay informed about modern organized crime, not Hollywood's version, but the real operations happening right now in cities across America, subscribe to the Syndicate Files immediately. We investigate the stories that other channels won't touch, the criminal enterprises operating in the shadows while the world looks away. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and don't miss our next deep dive. Drop a comment below. Were you shocked to learn the five families are still this active? Did you know about the NBA gambling scandal? Share this with someone who thinks the mob is just history. The Syndicate Files, where we expose the organized crime happening right now, today, in 2026.